Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
I'm David Larkins. I'm the line editor of the Pendragon role-playing game.
And I'm Jeff Richard. I'm a ne'er-do-well and creative director for Chaosium.
You know, the best thing I have to say about doing interviews like these is that I get a chance to really look into books that I probably wouldn't have a chance to because of time or because of circumstance. And one of them is definitely Pendragon, something that I've had my eye on for a long, long time. Now, when I was young, in my early teens, I remember starting to buy D&D books, and I would see a box of the box set for Pendragon or the books for Pendragon, and I was really, really big into like Arthurian legends and mythology. I loved the Excalibur movie from 1981, even to the. People say it's corny, but I love the original. I don't know if it's the original actually. The Green Knight movie with Sean Connery. I thought that was,
Yeah.
all those things, anything with knights and stuff like that, I loved. But I would see this and I would look at it, and I remember at the time, I didn't pull the trigger to grab it because at the time, I didn't really understand about how certain role playing games have a feel and a style to them with their rule systems and the settings. And I would look at this at the time, think, okay, why get this when I have Dungeons and Dragons? Dungeons and Dragons have knights, they have paladins, and it wasn't until much, much later until I realized, like, oh wow, these role playing books, even though it might be same type of thing, it could be horror, it could be certain different times and places and mythology and real world based, but they have their own style. So let's talk about this book now. This is the sixth edition of the book. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
That's correct.
and this is one of Greg Stafford's last work.
This is the final role playing product that Greg was working on. I mean, he was working on it literally the week that he passed away.
Yes.
So this was his project when he passed. So
And
which is, of big emotional importance to David and I. Greg was a good friend, and part of the reason I think we're so proud of this edition is it really is. It's the Greg Stafford Ultimate Edition. Isn't that what I think? That's what Greg called it, isn't it?
Yes.
The Ultimate Edition.
Ultimate Edition. Yep.
But viewers, for those of you that don't know, Greg Stafford was the original creator of the Pendragon role-playing game series, and sadly he passed away a few years ago. One thing that stands out to me right away is the cover, and I was looking at this cover for the longest time, and I love it. It's a great piece of work of a looks like a either not a knight or squire talking to a knight, definitely with and the horse is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Um, but it's not your typical, like most role playing games. When I think of like knights, usually it's very action packed. They're like like the second edition cover to D&D. They have the knight, the horse running too. But this is something much more different. To me it feels like it's an emphasis of this is a role playing game. It's going to be discussion. There's intrigue. There's politics. All sorts of different plots and stories. Now,
Mm-hmm.
am I correct? Is that
Oh yeah, this is this is where you're playing. You're playing a knight, and you're playing a knight in Arthurian fantasy, and it's worth emphasizing that this is in Arthurian fantasy. So, like you mentioned D&D, and D&D, D&D was my first role playing game, and it's it draws on a bunch of influences. The big ones being, at least in the earliest editions, it's kind of a um, um, if you take one part Tolkien, one part Arthurian fantasy, one part Fritz Lieber, and one part Jack Vance, you put it in a blender and throw in, some special sauce from Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson to kind of blend it out. That's what you have. So there's elements of Arthurian fantasy in it, but it's D&D is definitely not Arthurian, right? But Arthurian fantasy. I mean, I grew up on that. I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
us did. They're powerful stories, and you're playing a knight, and you're fighting against other knights, and you're going off on quests. And some of these quests, I mean, did you watch the new Green Knight movie, Manny?
I did. I did.
And I know you mentioned, I know you'd mentioned earlier, in talking to me, you saw Excalibur. A lot of these quests, they're not just about martial prowess, they're about who you are. And that's one of the greatest things about this game is that it's less how kick-ass my knight is, and it's more about role playing who my knight is. And my failures are often as much fun. In this way, it's kind of like Cthulhu. My failures are often as much fun as my successes.
Hmm.
Mhm. Do you feel the same way, David?
Oh, 100%. And yeah, I mean that was the thinking behind commissioning this art. Although a little bit of trivia for you is that the art from the starter set.
Before you say, have you noticed the color of that knight with a big axe?
Yeah, yeah,
Have
yeah,
you
yeah.
noticed that? Hey, Manny, what
He's
color is that knight?
It looks green, at least on my
Oh
screen.
my God! Could it be the Green Knight,
Could
David?
it be the Green Knight? Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. We put so many Easter eggs in there because that's Gawain, because that's his heraldry on his surcoat there.
Oh,
But
that's
we
right.
also wanted it to be something like Manny, like you had that reaction where you're just like, I'm just looking at this as a piece of art that stands alone. You don't have to know anything. And that in fact speaks to one of the things about Pendragon is that I think people might think, oh, I have to know a lot about these stories. And no, I didn't know much about it when I got started. But yeah, a little bit of trivia is that the art from the starter set was actually originally going to be on this book, and then we decided to move it over to the starter set, and that's kind of your action piece because that's the starter set. That's like, hey, I want to spend $30 American on this box, and I don't know anything about it, but that's some cool art, so I'm going to pick up the starter set. But that too depicts a canonical moment. That's Arthur drawing the sword, and Merlin putting a little glamour on it at the Battle of Carleon. Again, you don't need to know any of that. It's just there for if you're a nerd about Arthurian fantasy, you can go, oh, I know exactly what that is. And the other two books that are going to be coming out in the sort of core collection, the Game Master's Handbook and the Noble's Handbook, are also going to have similar pieces, also by Mark Smiley, which, I mean,
Oh, and I
that
love
was just,
stuff.
I love Mark's work, and it was so great to be able to work with him on these covers.
And I have to say the interior art in this book is equally amazing. It feels like something you would pick up from the library on the subject of King Arthur. I'm just showing some quick images, things like this that you would see in old medieval art, um,
Hmm.
and he's like that. But I'll have to say, if I may share, my favorite art piece coming up.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
There it is.
Oh
This
yeah,
one.
Yeah.
uh, the Raphaelite style.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who did this one, David? I can't. I'm spacing on it.
It's this two woman project. They kind of do digital collage work where they use photos as the basis. They
Yeah,
take photos of models and then they just work it up as digital art, which is I think what gives it that very real
the
feel there.
Raphaelite style.
They're called Wicked Duel. They're in the credits. Um, yeah, no, I mean, Jeff, you and I mean, however many hours we spent also with Sim, our layout genius, just talking about mood and identifying the different strands of Arthurian art, the pre Raphaelite art, the sort of like symbolist art that followed it, also the medieval manuscript art. And that was our sort of remit to go out and find some artists who could work in those different styles.
And that's one of the things that I think, both David and I really wanted to have in this book is to have it really convey that feeling of the Arthurian fantasy, and the and to both of us, that shouldn't look like anything else, right? Because Arthurian fantasy has been a part of Western art for almost 1,000 years, and it's got,
Yeah.
part of it is medieval, but more recently, the pre-Raphaelites, the symbolists, they went nuts over this stuff. I mean, so much of late 19th century, early 20th century art, it was Rossetti who, wasn't it Rossetti who did some of the
Hmm.
pre-Raphaelite, just beautiful, beautiful stuff. It reinvented um, Western painting, all with these Arthurian themes. And we really wanted to kind of pull some of that feeling in the book. And, obviously we couldn't commission, the modern equivalent of Rossetti to do the art of that. Um, you know, that'd be a pretty pricey book. Um, but yeah, I
I
think
think we found some real winners, though, for
oh
sure.
yeah,
I mean, my
oh
God.
absolutely. And, and
Speaking of the internet, just allowing you to like contact pretty much your perfect choices. Yeah, no, I'm so
and,
happy
and
that
I
that
like
turned out.
this. I like the feel of what we put together in these books, and it yeah. I mean, it's all gorgeous.
Yeah.
The
That's so great. I love that.
Yeah, and again, but I love this one as well.
Mm.
You
Hmm.
know, but in Pendragon, one of the neat things about it is you play a knight. So when your player asks, "Well, what class am I going to play?" You're playing a knight.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, and we've gotten, but in Pendragon, every knight is such a radically individualized character, and it's something else that I really really love about this game is it doesn't matter that we're all playing knights. Every one of our characters are just radically different, radically individualized, um, and and there's and as a result, our characters often have more. Your Pendragon character often has more role playing game hooks, more personality, more a sense of who they are than your multi-classed ranger bard or whatever. Well, my personality is I'm a ranger who's also a bard and a half
Who's
elf.
also a tiefling.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that's right. Right. Yeah, remember, I'm old here. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, like, for modern D&D, like, Manny, you were saying, like, back in the day, it's like, well, there's knights in D&D already. I'd say D&D nowadays has become so much its own genre that the medieval trappings in the game are almost incidental. And I think a lot of people want to play D&D for reasons other than the medieval trappings, which is great. But there's medieval fantasy still has this great power to it that I think, yeah, Pendragon has always had. I
Well,
mean, that's what got me into the game, was reading a review of a supplement where the reviewer talked about just the flavor of the game, and I said, oh, I've got to check this out. This sounds amazing.
well,
you know
and the stories. I mean, real medieval fantasy, and that's
yeah.
one of the things I love about Pendragon. Another thing I love a lot of things about the game is that it is the medieval fantasy elements of it are not just superficial tropes. You're playing a knight, and admittedly, it's not historical, right? It manages to combine everything from basically right after the fall of Rome to the War of the Roses, and all of that kind of gets jammed in. But at the same time, it has this authentic feel for the things that your knight is concerned about. Your knight has to deal with their relationship with their liege. Your knight will fall in love. Your knight, you're very good chance your knight is going to fall in love with somebody who's not his wife. Uh, which happened to me in my last game. Oops.
Funny how that happens.
Um, your knight is going to have to deal with conflicts of loyalty. Your knight may have to determine their relationship with whatever religion they subscribe to, and this is also a period of time um, where you have the old pre-Christian religion in Britain, the Arthur and the King and the new orders of knighthood are increasingly very much, they're part of the church, or at least gaining the support from the church, which can cause conflict for your character and conflict for even conflict for the players. And it's just such a fabulous source of stories. And then the games themselves are just a hoot. And the other really cool thing, I was running it at GaryCon, and what people loved about it is, do you know how hard it is to do two knights charging each other with lances in 5e?
I've
How would
never
you do
tried.
that? How would you do that to make it actually super exciting?
Right.
Right? How do and you can't, because D&D is an attritional system, right? Oh, I hit him with a lance. Oh, okay. Well, I did X number of hit points. That's fine. I got 75. Don't worry about it. Right? So the in D&D, two knights hitting each other, going at each other with a lance is not terribly exciting. It's no different than any other form of combat. But in Pendragon, when your character is charging it with is on a horse, they got you got your armor on, you got your shield there, you've got your lance, and you're galloping at full tilt towards another knight who's also got their armor on and is going right at you with their lance. It's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, because if things go bad for you, you're dead. And it's so exciting because and if things go a little bit bad for you, you're knocked off your horse, you're screwed. Horrible things can happen to you, but if you pull it off and you're inspired by your passion, this is when that falling in love with a woman who's not your wife, at least in my character, was inspired by the passion of a fair lady. You knock that person off, and it's just exciting because it's just boom, combat's over.
Also, both players get to roll a die.
Yes.
It's not just one person, and then
It's
everyone's waiting their turn.
It's exciting. It's exciting. The combat it's frightening, and you're going, oh my God, I'm gonna get killed if I keep staying in I keep fighting. Hey, what do I do for a living? Oh God, damn! Right. I think I have to do it all the time, don't I? Well, what's the average life expectancy of a knight? 25, 26.
You're right.
Live fast, baby. Live fast. And that's exciting, and it makes great. It creates great gaming moments.
Mm. One I did try in my young years to make D&D into a King Arthur type of campaign, and it failed miserably. And the reason why it did, nothing wrong with the game system itself, is just that for a setting like King Arthur, the magic system in D&D is just too overwhelming. I would, at least the books I remember reading, magic felt very subtle. It wasn't, you didn't see Merlin like casting fireballs and teleporting around and lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. The setting just felt, it's different. Everything, being that these are mythological stories, there was a point to them. There was a story behind it. There's a reason why this story exists. There was a moral lesson behind it. And I think that's why I failed in doing so. But
also, rules, Manny. I think rules matter in how you interact with a setting, right? So some, if I'm wanting to tell the story of being a knight in King Arthur's court, with the goal of being, on the round table and go off and look for the Holy Grail, you want to have a rule system that plays up the things that are involved in those stories. And that's not what D&D does. D&D doesn't have mechanics to deal with loyalty. It doesn't have mechanics to deal with one's passions or one's personality. It's just not what, that's not what D&D games are about. Whereas Pendragon, Pendragon is probably not the best rule system if what I want to do is take a magic user and a dwarf and a knight and go into a dungeon, right? It's probably not the best rule system for doing that because that's not what the Arthurian stories are all about. But if
Hmm.
I want to have a story where we're all playing knights, and this is the knights of literature, so of course there are women knights as well. You can be whoever you. There can be Greek knights. There are knights from Africa. There's I can't remember. Was there a knight from? Who's a? I know. I mean, I know that there were Arabic and Saracen knights in the Arthurian.
Hmm.
I can't remember. Was there an Indian? Is
Palomides, I think, is technically,
he Indian? I thought he was Greek.
no, no, further east.
Yeah,
So,
well, right,
yeah.
because so everyone in the world ends up wanting to be at Arthur's court because Arthur's just that awesome. So you can be a knight from wherever, and even though that's not historically terribly accurate, it is entirely accurate within the genre of Arthurian fantasy. Same thing with women knights, completely um, uh, within the genre. If you look at a little bit adjacent to the Arthur myths, the Roland myths with
Hmm.
Orlando Furiosa. What was the name of the
That's
is
it.
it Britomarte?
Britomart, yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the most kick-ass knight in the Italian Roland cycle is this ferocious, amazing woman knight. And these are medieval tropes because you're playing. You're not playing. There probably was not a historical King Arthur. Pretty good chance. Certainly, at least not a historical King Arthur who managed to unify all of Britain. And I guarantee that he didn't go off and try to conquer France and march into Italy. My history sometimes gets a little shaky, but I'm pretty sure that never happened. That's fine. It's fine. We're we're playing the fantasy, the romances.
Hmm.
Well, before I start asking questions about what this book has to offer exactly, for those that are fans of the role playing game series for some time, that either they're fans of fifth edition, fourth edition, and so forth, and I did notice that there's a conversion section back here.
Hmm.
But is there much differences between this version compared to previous editions?
People ask that a lot, and it's a little difficult to answer because none of the Pendragon versions have been radically different from each other. But as Greg said in his designer notes in this book, this at the same time represents the most change there has been since first edition moved to third edition, because technically there wasn't a second edition. Long story. Um, because of the number of small changes that he made. It's just a lot of little things. There's a couple of new passions that he introduced. He expanded combat somewhat just to make it a little more. The biggest change really is that Greg was all about. I want to make this game as accessible and understandable as possible to anyone who picks it up. So I'm going to explain how combat works and give you lots of options in the rules. I'm going to lay it out really clearly, like what is a knight, what is glory, what is honor, how do knights spend their days, no pun intended, that kind of thing, right? He just wanted it to be something that was the clearest and most accessible version of Pendragon that's ever come out, and I think he succeeded in that completely.
I mean, it's completely backwards compatible. Um,
Absolutely, it is. I mean, the conversion guide is what, like 2 pages or something like that. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
I'd say the changes are about it's very similar between the differences between, say, the current edition of RuneQuest and previous editions of RuneQuest. Right? There's some new elements to it, but if I've got if I can certainly take out my old Big Rubble books and my Snake Pie Hollow and I can run it with from the early 80s, I can run it with the current edition of RuneQuest. Same thing's true with Pendragon. I can take out all my old Pendragon material and I can run it with the core rule book. And the amount of house ruling I have to do and homework is pretty minimal. It's
Yeah.
the key thing about it is I think that the system, as David says, it flows better. It's easier to use.
Yeah.
Some of the kind of jerky, clunky bits that Greg got a chance to revisit and rewrite and make it just a heck of a lot smoother. So
And we rewrote the battle rules. I guess that
yeah,
shouldn't go
well,
without saying.
yes, I'd say the battle rules are probably the single biggest change, and that's
Biggest, yeah. Hmm.
the problem with having the Greg's old battle rules is that unless you were Greg Stafford, it was pretty damn hard to run those battle rules. And part of it was Greg was an old war gamer, and he wanted to make war battle rules, and he could not get himself out of making battle rules a war game. Right? And you're sitting there and you're figuring out, in all of his rules, same thing with what he did with RuneQuest. It's like, well, who wins the battle? And how do I figure out who won the battle? Honestly, that's irrelevant. That's not what I need to have in terms of what my character is doing in a battle, right? I want to know what happens. How does my character make a difference to the battle? What happens to my character? How is this battle exciting for my character? And the new battle rules do a fantastic job of it. In the old rules, I used to always hate. I used to dread battles, right? Because they were tough to run, and you kind of had to figure out after the fact, well, why was that cool for my character? The new one, it's all laser focused on the character and your players, which to me is awesome.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the beginning chapter of Welcome to Camelot because I was curious to see how you would take the legend of King Arthur and try to explain it to anyone that might be new to it. And I thought you did a
Mhm.
great job. Sometimes I think, especially if you're just know a bit about King Arthur, you may just know just the highlights and may not want to play just that part in the mythology. But this
Mhm.
does a great job in expanding so that if you want to go before King Arthur, you have that option. You want to do something afterwards, you could, but this is what the setting would be like. Do you feel that's how this game is set up for? So you can play this any period in the King Arthur mythology?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Pendragon might be best known these days for being a dynastic game with the Great Pendragon campaign. That's honestly something I wanted to de-emphasize, at least initially, with the new line, because I was seeing a lot in the fan community of people who thought that that was the only way to play the game, was to commit to an 80 game year campaign that would take you 2+ years to play. And I wanted people to understand, like, no, you can actually hop around. You can actually, if you love knights in shining armor and courtly love and tournaments, play in the romance and tournament period. Just set your games there. That's what fourth edition used to default to. If you want your games to feel more like the Dev Patel Green Knight games, set them during the Grail Quest and Twilight periods when everything is really going to hell, or like you say, set it before King Arthur and just kind of explore that space, and then you can keep playing. So, we set the default as the Boy King period, when Arthur pulls the sword from the stone and then has to consolidate his rule, and like Jeff said, eventually, historically, goes on to conquer Rome. But
As one does.
but yeah, as one does. But that's because that is kind of the period that has all those beats that everyone knows. The Sword and the Stone, of course. Founding of the Round Table, Arthur and Guinevere, Merlin, all those things.
It's also the point where we have tons of potentiality, right? Your characters, the story is just really starting with the Boy King. Yeah, we all know there's the Anarchy period, and there's a period before Arthur, but you're there for Arthur. We're playing. It's Pendragon.
Yeah.
That's what you want to get into, and you don't know I mean, once Arthur pulls the sword, you don't know what direction things are going to go. You know, it's
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, and this is something. This is something that what I find really interesting is, yes, there's a big meta plot to the Great Pendragon chronology. You know, we know that Arthur's going to go on, and Arthur's going to found the he's going to beat the Saxons and beat off the Saxons. He's going to become the king. Camelot's going to become this neat place. There's going to be a Knights of the Round Table. At some point, Lancelot's going to show up. We're going to get Guinevere. You know this stuff, and that's fine because that's Arthur's story. Your story is not that. Your story, that may affect your story. It may not terribly affect your story. You may go off and do your, well, not may, you will go off and do your own awesome things. And, sometimes your night will get woven into this big backdrop story, which is exciting. And it's to me, it's the it's the best way to show off a dynamic setting, where there are these big things going on, and there are going to be things, um, they're going to be things that don't even necessarily aren't having your character in the very spotlight on this, and that's fine. Your character really may not give a damn whether Lancelot is Guinevere is cheating on Arthur with Lancelot, or that may be something that, oh God, guys, I can't believe it. Lancelot, our bud, I just realized he's sleeping with the king. This is a problem for us. You have all these ways of dealing with this big story, and every time you run it, it's different. Even though
Yeah.
those big beats, we all know that they're going to be there.
Character creation. Now, I'm sure we could spend 2 hours talking about the details of how this was put together, but for the sake of time, well, let's talk about instead about maybe what are some of the highlights. What do you think some of the what makes character creation in Pendragon maybe different from other fantasy role playing games?
Well, I mean, it comes down to what Jeff and I have been talking about, which is that is the crux of where you find out what what you're starting with, and what kind of personality your character has. Pendragon does not have an intelligence attribute or a wisdom attribute, or anything like that. It's all your characteristics, as we call them, are physical. It's your strength, your dexterity, your like the most sort of like metaphysical one is appeal, because that's just sort of like how you look to other people, how you come across to other people. But really, the meat and potatoes of the game are the traits and passions, and you can either do kind of like a fixed spread of numbers. You can customize a little bit, or you can even just roll randomly if you just want to see, hey, let's see, maybe my guy's very vengeful or very forgiving. I don't know. Let's roll some dice and find out. That's always a fun way to do it, because you can get some interesting characters out of that. But even with the sort of fixed, guided character creation, I mean, every character is going to be different,
Yeah,
and
it's that
yeah,
personality trait matrix that
yeah,
makes it for me. It's the rest of it, the various skills. It's great.
hmm
It's a BRP system. It just uses a D20 instead of percentile dice. But it's if you've played one BRP game, Cthulhu, RuneQuest, you'll recognize what's going on for a large extent in skill use for Pendragon. But in character creation, which ties in directly to play, the fun part is figuring out your personality traits. You get to decide. Hey, am I a jerk? Am I a am I not? Am I a merciful knight? Oh, let's see how that's going to work. Let's see how being merciful is going to work out for somebody who, at a certain day, your day job is to be the hired killer for a landowner. You know, um, am I vengeful? Well, you know, that might work really well, but you know, that might also be something that gets you in a lot of trouble. Um, and when you're building up the character and you're building up these personality traits, one of the things I love about it is you realize I've got this character with great skills and is could be really a demon on the battlefield, but my personality traits are going to completely screw me up because they're gonna lead me for doing stuff that I know is not necessarily the smartest thing to be doing, and it's so much fun
What does honor and glory come into play exactly?
all the damn time.
Well, yeah. I think it's Robin Laws had the maxim of like the first step zero, really, if you're designing a role playing game, any role playing game, is identifying the core activity of the game. What is this game about? When we sit down to play, throw all the other stuff away. What's the one activity that if we took that away, we wouldn't be playing game X anymore? So for Pendragon, it really is gaining glory is the core activity, because like you could whittle down the trait list, you could, simplify the passions, whatever. I mean, God forbid you could get rid of them, but as long as you're trying to gain glory and maintain your honor, I mean, that's kind of a subclause, really. That's what it's about, because every knight wants to gain glory, which are a little bit like experience points. Oh, you're going to get 200 glory for defeating this ogre or whatever. But you can also gain glory for a really nice speech that you give in front of your lord. You can gain glory for bagging, the prized deer during a hunt. Glory is just it's a value neutral measurement of how many people are talking about your knight. It doesn't matter if they're talking about you because you're a jerk, right? But they're talking about you.
It
you know
incentivizes you to
hmm
do cool stuff in game,
Yes.
right? So the
and
glory.
do things that knights care about,
Yep.
like get a good marriage, have an heir that you can pass on your estate to. You get glory for stuff like
Man, on
that.
this battlefield, I'm gonna charge King Lot. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
charge. I know he's tougher than me. I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
I know he's a king. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna charge him. Do I get
Yeah.
some glory for it? Yes, yes, you do.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
I'm going to throw the biggest feast, and I'm going to spend way more than I could
Myself,
possibly
man.
afford. Yeah, I'm going to bankrupt myself, and I'm going to get so much glory for it. It's going to be great.
I have no idea how I'll survive afterwards, but boy, it'll be worth
Yeah.
it. And that's
Yeah.
dude. So glory is super important. Now, honor is another great one because did you watch any of you guys watch the new Shogun?
Oh, not yet. It's on my
Not,
list.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. I'm
so
familiar with the story.
yeah,
I read the book a long
so
time ago.
in that you have all these samurai that are trying to follow Bushido, right? And it's the same thing with honor. Honor is your character really, can I follow the warrior code and uphold it? And where it gets to be the most fun is even when that doesn't necessarily make any sense. And because that generates great stories. It generates great role playing activity, and it provides a limit. Well, I could do all sorts of horrible things to get my glory up, but it wouldn't be honorable. And if my honor
Oh,
goes
yeah.
down, if it goes
Mhm.
low enough, I'm not a knight anymore.
Yeah, you're kicked out of the knighthood.
Everybody's like,
You're
"Oh,
out.
don't trust that David guy."
And when it like so that was actually one of the sections I was referring to earlier in terms of what got beefed up by Greg. Honor in previous editions got a few pages of coverage. In the new edition, Greg really went into great detail, lots of worked examples. Here's what you can do to gain honor, which is very difficult. Here's what you can do to lose honor, much more easy to do that. But you can even lose honor through a whisper campaign. Like people can start talking behind your back, and if you don't do anything, hello, throw the gauntlet down, right? If you don't come out and say, I, abjure these accusations, and sir so and so, you have been speaking ill of me and I challenge you to a duel. I mean, you're kind of forced to do that unless you're okay with losing multiple points of honor every year.
Which is awesome because, as well, a rational person doesn't decide that just because talking smack behind your back doesn't
Hmm.
decide. I think what we have to do is we have to charge at each other on horses at full tilt
To try and kill each
front of
other, yeah.
everybody, in front of everybody. But Pendragon provides you an in-game mechanic to incentivize doing that, and that to me the reason that it works so great and so much better than, say, using something like 5e or even chivalry and sorcery or other games to try to do something that has the feeling of the Arthurian romances is the game incentivizes you to play like a knight, right? Not just I have knightly powers,
Right.
but to incentivize my character, I've got to do the sort, I've got to think about this how a knight would think about this. And the game incentivizes me and rewards me for choosing the possibly stupid but entirely appropriate knightly response to a situation. And it actually penalizes me for doing the if I try to do something that might be smarter to do and a heck of a lot more rational, but it isn't within the feel of the genre, right? If I start
Yeah.
behaving totally rational about these things and they're talking smack behind me, I'm not going to do anything about it because that would be stupid. My honor goes down. um Somebody insults me, I could, immediately challenge him to a fight, but I probably would get, I'm probably going to get injured. It's going to be that bad if I do that. That would be the rational thing to do, but if I do that, my honor is going to go down. So you've got the honor constantly pushing you to react in a way appropriate to being a knight. It's a wonderful mechanic.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, the combat system can be pretty deadly pretty quick.
Oh yeah, it's again, it's common with all the BRP games. Um, the difference, at a certain level, I'd say it's slightly less dangerous than RuneQuest or Cthulhu
Hmm.
because your character has more hit points
Yes.
than their RuneQuest or Cthulhu equivalent. But on the other side, you don't have any healing magic. You don't have any surgeons. Uh,
Also, those criticals hit hard.
oh, those.
When you're
Oh,
literally doing a double fisted dice roll of damage. It's like,
well, but the other thing
yeah,
is that like after a RuneQuest battle, somebody's always got some
yeah,
healing magic and
yeah.
whatnot, and they're able to get you back up. And if worst comes to worst, you go to your priest, and your priest can fix you up. Not in
Right.
Pendragon. It's just I've had ones where my character has fought this tough skirmish and I'm all banged up and guess what? It looks like we're gonna have a bigger fight tomorrow, and I'm like,
Hmm.
but I'm in terrible shape. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. There's no healing potions for you, baby. And
Yeah, and there's actually rules for the extra damage you do to your body by forcing yourself to keep going. But sometimes those rules are there because sometimes that's all you have. And to Jeff's point, I think the equivalent of RuneQuest healing magic in Pendragon is literally the Holy Grail. That's how high you have to go to get to that level of healing.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and that means, and this is one of the things I love about every BRP game, but I think this is especially true with
mhm,
Pendragon, is combat as a result is exciting. Every single combat very well could be your last.
yeah,
And that gives you this visceral thrill that doesn't really exist in 5e. right? 5e, it's actually kind of hard to die in 5e,
Yeah.
right? It's that's not where the thrill comes. And actually, most combats you have in fifth edition, they're really there to whittle away, you know, for you to basically whittle away some of your resources, use those spells, and eventually get to a place where when you have the big boss fight, you're in a weak position comparatively, so right. That's the purpose for having a lot of combats in D&D. Well, in Pendragon, you're going to get all that excitement usually in one or two fights, and actually two fights are terrifying. I mean, like what? What? What do you mean? There's another fight? We have
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about magic in this world. Now, there's no Merlin class. You know, in fact, it's probably more similar to Lord of the Rings, where there's magic in the world, but there are no wizards per se. It's something Merlin is a unique creature. Would you say
Yeah.
that's how it is in this world?
Yeah, I mean the default rule for magic is that it's whatever the game master wants it to be that serves the story. So you can have Merlin show up, or the Lady of the Lake, one of several ladies of the lake, show up, or whomever, Morgan Le Fay, let's say, and and whatever works for the story. That's kind of the one exception to the healing thing. It's like, if you really, like, if you feel bad for your players, yeah, Merlin shows up and he helps you out, but he's gonna have to go take a break. He's gonna have to take a breather after this. You're not gonna see him for another year or so, and Arthur's not gonna have him around to be sage counsel or anything like that. So yeah, it's a story tool more than anything else.
Well, it's certainly not what your characters are using.
Absolutely not. No,
Like,
no,
yeah,
no.
I don't know. You don't have any magic.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
magical things? Of course there are.
yeah.
It's the 6th century. Of course there's weird magic. You can go and visit the elves, but the elves aren't pointy-eared Orlando Bloom clones. They're
No.
scary. They're terrifying. I hear I hear that if you go into the elf into one of the little elf places under those rocks, 20 years pass for every night you stay with them. I heard that.
Mhm.
Is that true, David?
Oh, make your folklore skill roll. Let's find out.
And that's the thing I love about it, Manny, is that
Yeah.
magic in Pendragon is mysterious and frightening.
Yeah, like to the fairy thing, it's like if you can make a folklore roll, you might remember, like, hey, if I turn my shirt on and inside out as I walk through these woods, they're not going to bother me, or if I throw some salt behind me, they won't follow me home. And that actually works, but we don't know why. It just does.
Stupid superstition can work if done correctly in Pendragon.
That's right.
Oh, that's really awesome. Um, Game Master tools. Um, what is there anything in this book that could help game masters that maybe are not familiar with running a setting like this? Is there anything that can help them out?
So, obviously, like you said, the first chapter there, Welcome to Camelot, we wanted to give as much of a grounding in the setting as possible. There are some guidelines for awarding glory, like just kind
Yeah.
of some benchmarks that you can throw in. And obviously, most of your opponents are going to be other knights. So you can just look, there's actually some templates in the back, like the adventuring knight, the hunter knight, the courtly knight. Grab those, turn those into an NPC. Boom, done. So that's in the core rulebook. The core rulebook gives you everything you need to run the core game experience of, go on a quest, do
Well, and
things, come
and
home.
and, and although we're talking about the core night or the core rulebook, of course, what product just came out with this?
The
Uh,
Grey Knight.
the Gray Knight, which is do you mind, Manny, if we talk about that for just
Oh no, please, please.
so throw that out. Do you have the cover handy there, Manny?
No, but I'll put it post
Because it
production.
is a totally rock and roll cover. I totally love that. But so you take the core rule book, and we have a amazing short campaign, or relatively short campaign, The Grey Knight.
Mhm.
And it was written by the same guy who wrote Masks of Nyarlathotep, Larry DiTillio, who also, if I recall, created She-Ra. And just was an amazing writer. And in my opinion, it's one of the best campaigns of any game system of all time. And if you've taken the core rules and you've played the Grey Knight, you've got everything with that. You know how to run this game.
Mm.
I
And,
mean,
100%.
100%.
and you also have that wonderful starter set, also.
Well, exactly. You should really buy all of them because the starters.
Well, and we designed the starter set, and this is, something we're going to try and do as much as we can with the line, going forward, is to make it as modular as possible. So you can, if you have the starter set and you don't necessarily want to grab the core rulebook right away, you can grab the Grey Knight, and it dovetails perfectly with the sword campaign from the starter set. Or you can get all three, have everyone roll up original characters to use in the sword campaign rather than the pre-gens, and do it that way. But yeah, we wanted it to all like kind of mesh together. So it's perfectly legitimate to get the core rulebook and the Grey Knight and start there, or you can get the starter set and
I
go
mean,
back a little bit.
if I was doing it, I would
Yeah,
start with the starter set. Absolutely, with that, I would just make my own characters out of the core rule book, and I'd go through
yeah,
the starter set stuff because it's cool. It's a great
yeah.
it's a great campaign, and then I would follow up with the Grey Knight, and that's how many sessions is that between it? It's what, 5 in the starter.
Well, it's 6 game years, and so I think for a typical group that would be minimum 7 or 8 sessions, maybe upwards of a dozen, depending on how short your sessions are or how much you want to just allow space for role playing. Yeah, it's a good 2 to 3 months of gaming right there.
And by the time you're through all of that, you certainly will know how to, it teaches you. That's one of the great things about both the starter set and the Grey Knight. It teaches it, not only are they great campaigns, but they teach you as a GM, okay, this is the sort of stuff going on. And then, you get over with
Yeah.
it. You can your campaign will continue off in its own awesome direction. And you can keep rolling with it. So that's what I would do. I mean, I would just buy all three of them. But that's because I'm the altruistic kind of guy I am.
Okay. Well, the starter set has a wonderful solo adventure, which leads into my next question. You have a also great solo scenario section in this book as well.
Mm.
What can you share us about that?
Well, I would certainly love to see more of those sort of choose your own adventure style solo quests, and we'll see what we can fit in. We'll also be sooner than later launching our community content program, the Companions of Arthur, which, if you're familiar with Miskatonic Repository and Johnstown Compendium, it's just like that. Would love to see some folks write some solo materials there. But we've had some great ones come out for Call of Cthulhu, for example, and I think Pendragon is particularly well suited just because of the genre of the lone knight errant to have solo adventures. The solo scenarios in the core rule book are for, this is another thing I love about Pendragon, is that perennial problem of the player who can't make it that week, right? They get to do a solo scenario instead, and roll some dice and find out what their knight was up to, since they weren't able to join the quest this week, So, and yeah, those can range all over the place. Those can be like, oh, I visited a foreign court, or I went on a pilgrimage, or all kinds of things. And then, of course, your knight can go mad and run off into the woods, and then you have a madness solo to roll on to see whether they were rescued by a friendly shepherd, or whether they joined a monastery for a while, or worked as a blacksmith, or just wandered the hills and found religion.
Let me ask you a silly question. If
Hmm.
if someone wanted to make a Monty Python adventure out of this,
Mm-hmm.
uh, would you say is easy to do so?
Yeah. Uh,
Sure.
It's funny you should bring that up about Holy Grail. I actually think Holy Grail is one of the best Arthurian films ever made.
It is. Yeah.
It's actually, if you go through it, you look at the adventures that the knights have. The guys that were writing this, they knew their Arthurian stories. Um, the big issue there is the big difference is the Monty Python knights are pretty incompetent, but everybody's had their Sir Robin moment. Uh, everybody's um, I've seen plenty of parties that have the Sir Lancelot kills everybody and then apologizes for it situation.
That has happened in my campaigns, including player characters, So
I have certainly seen the chaste knight being rescued from the Tower of Temptation and not being terribly
uh-huh.
thrilled about it. But the Holy Grail, Holy Grail, although a fantastic comedy, like Life of Brian, was written by people that really, really knew their source material.
Yeah. And also I think it just speaks to the fact, and we have some of this in the marginalia art in the book. Any decent, a great way to evoke that medieval flavor is to not take things too seriously. Medieval people loved fart humor. They loved a good plot twist, just like anybody else. Where something that seemed really serious actually turns out to be a big goof, or vice versa. So when you approach playing Pendragon, like, have fun with it for sure. That being said, I think Greg had a table rule that if you made a Monty Python joke at the table, your character died instantly. So, because probably 35 years of hearing that got to him after a while, I'm sure.
Well, that's funny. So toward the end of the book, you have a coat of arms generator. You have pre-generated characters, which is awesome, and a character sheet. Is there anything else about this book that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
I think just on the mechanics side, and asking about what's new in the new edition, I did sort of remember a couple things that I love to point out. One is the expanded horses chapter, because your horse really should be another
Horse
character.
personality. Horse
Yes,
personality.
and you get glory depending on the color of your horse. If you have a white horse, you get glory for that, because those are like the most prized coat colors, right? The more pure white your horse is, the more glorious it is.
Oh
And
God.
I have seen players bankrupt themselves to get the better
Horse.
color horse, not necessarily the better horse damage, just the better color of the horse, right?
Oh no, no. Oh, Manny, what I would, overall, and especially if you're not familiar with Pendragon, or just kind of familiar with it, this is the time to try it. This is with
Yeah.
that. It is, as far as I'm concerned, this is Greg's very best version of the game. The rules are very clear. The mechanics, one of the things that, you can't really talk about it because you've got to actually experience it, to understand it. But the mechanics are seamless. You move from combat to personality trait to worrying about your horse to dealing with the, your issues of who am I loyal to, etc. All of this is just seamless and is fully supported by the game mechanics. And at the same time, the mechanics, like all BRP games, are really simple. And there's a reason that, I don't know a game designer out there, at least to anybody that's designed for more than one game, um, that has not been heavily influenced by Pendragon. It's very much the, within RPG game designers. I think it's the holy grail, to use that phrase, the holy grail of game design. It's I cannot, I love Cthulhu, I love RuneQuest, but I think in terms of just seamless mechanics that do exactly that support exactly the key activities of the game, and that there isn't any real extra fat on them. This is pretty much, well, your platonic form of a amazingly well designed game.
Yeah, I personally love, and I think we talked about this on our RuneQuest videos as well, Jeff. That reading these books is interesting because in a lot of role playing books, sometimes there's like a whole team collaboration, which are fine. They're good books, but sometimes it's not a voice. It's like something sometimes I like reading something just to find themes and I don't know, just see what they were thinking of, the writer, the creator of this game,
Yeah.
and seeing reading this and RuneQuest. I feel sad. I've never met Greg, and I would love to talk to him more about some of his concepts and his theology, spirituality, what he felt was moral and why, and just pick his brain about philosophy. In a way, I've never met him, but I know I'm starting to know him.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, with this game, one of the great things about Pendragon is you explore a lot of issues that were really of great personal importance to Greg. And
Yeah.
Pendragon's a very personal game, right? You deal with the issues there, and you can have your session can move from Monty Python jokes to very quickly dealing with really some issues about what it means to to be in the world. What is morality? What is right? What is wrong? And so forth. And then I'll go back into Monty Python jokes a little bit later.
This book references other books. I think David, you mentioned them briefly in the beginning. Like
Yeah.
I know there was a reference to a noble handbook or source book.
Hmm.
Do you know how soon those will be out?
Oh, as soon as we can make it happen. I mean, basically, the manuscript that Greg had finished in 2018 was 550 pages of a Word document. So that's not even including art or any of that kind of stuff. We weren't going to publish a 700-page rule book, so we we broke it up. And so the core rule book is everything you need to play the game. The Game Master's Handbook is basically all the extra goodies that we couldn't fit into the core rule book that will help the game master, including like much more info on the setting. Right, there's a big chapter on religion, magic, and miracles, how all that works from a game master perspective, and just to help the GM present the world in a richer way, but also like systems like tournaments and feasting and battles and so forth.
Yeah, and that
And then,
yeah, and that book is done in terms of
oh yeah,
our.
they're both done. I mean, yeah, they're both done. Yeah. They just have to move through the production cycle, and so the Game Master's Handbook is up next. We can't be too specific about it until it's actually like arriving in warehouses, but just soon is all I could say. And then very soon after that will be the Noble's Handbook, which is some people love this part of Pendragon and other people don't really care, but it's what I call the sim medieval side of Pendragon, where it's like, hey, if you're really into like estate management and politicking and diplomacy and maybe building a castle for your character and like establishing a dynasty and getting into lawsuits with rival lords and that kind of thing, like that's all in there. There's an expanded family tree generator, so you can really like, you could actually like draw up a family tree and then you track what's happening to everybody. Again, some people love that. Some people just want to play a knight who goes out on quests. And so again, that's what the core rulebook focuses on. But the Noble's Handbook will sort of complete the set.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I love the Noble's Handbook. That's actually, for
Yeah.
me, that's a big part of the fun. But
I think a lot of people are going to want it. Yeah,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
not essential for play.
Right.
Right? The core rule book is all the stuff that's essential. The GM's book contains a tremendous amount of support for the GM, but you can still run this. You can run the game with just the core rule book. It provides additional support, and the nobles the nobles is really great for if you're doing that long multi-generational campaign. I'd say the nobles becomes absolutely essential then, because
And that's going to be timed for our other multi-generational publications.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
no. Anyways,
And my final question, Pendragon. So I've noticed, Jeff, you pronounce it differently than I do, and I'm wondering if I've been saying it wrong this whole time.
oh, I say it in a very American way, Pendragon. That's how Greg. Hey, Greg always called it Pendragon to me. So,
Pendragon.
oh yeah, yeah.
well, because it's a pen and a dragon.
And a dragon. And then the Brits like to say Pendragon. They like put the emphasis on that syllable. So there's one of the core concepts of the game is your Pendragon will vary, and that can include how you choose to pronounce the name of the game. So,
Well, especially since I'm pretty sure that none of us are able to pronounce it. That the old Anglo-Norman, um,
right.
from which it actually comes from. So, right? It's
Right.
is it Welsh or is it Anglo-Norman? I can't remember.
Well, it's originally Welsh, but it probably went through an Anglo-Norman filter.
Yeah.
I'm sure the original Welsh was even more obscure for sure.
But that's fine. All three of us we're in North America. Guess what? We can pronounce it how we damn well want to.
That's the great irony of the game is Greg was as American as apple pie, and he wrote one of the he wrote the premier game about one of the great British myth cycles, right? So and here we are.
And I welcome our viewers to write, what their take is as well. I'm curious what they'll say. I'm sure it'll be something interesting, being the internet. So, um, so David and Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the Pendragon Core Rulebook. It is out now, I believe.
Oh
It
yes,
is indeed. Absolutely.
Print and PDF. Let's see. I don't have any punny things to say, so I'll say. Everyone, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.